The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said to Nicodemus, "The Son of Man must be lifted up, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert, so that everyone who believes may have eternal life in him." Yes, God loved the world so much that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not be lost, but may have eternal life. For God sent his Son into the world, not to condemn the world, but so that through him the world might be saved. No one who believes in him will be condemned, but whoever refuses to believe, he is condemned already, because he has refused to believe in the name of God's only Son. On these grounds, a sentence pronounced that though the light has come into the world, people have shown that they prefer darkness to the light, because their deeds were evil. And indeed, everyone who does wrong hates the light and avoids it, for fear his actions should be exposed. But the man who lives by the truth comes out into the light, so that it may be plainly seen that what he does is done in God. The Gospel, the good news of the Lord. Oh, well, my homily, I've got the envelope that Chris gave me, so I have to do impromptu. Um, well, we live in a world that is essentially governed by self-interest, and it is built into our very human nature, isn't it? So uh, survival and self-preservation is the strongest human instinct. And then when you go to even in the family or in the neighborhood, the society, the world, this drive for self-survival and self-preservation is manifested in so many different ways. Yeah. Even in the Israeli-Hamas conflict, we see the evidence of this. And yet, we are not guided, we're not governed by self-interest and self-survival and self-preservation. The opposite is the case, in fact. If we are authentic Christians, we should be guided by Christ's self-giving love, isn't it? And this is the essence of the good news today. In that wonderful conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus. In previous episode, Nicodemus was told to be born again. And Nicodemus thought Jesus was talking Greek to him. He didn't understand. How can I, a grown man, go back into my mother's womb and be born? That's ridiculous. That's just nonsensical to him. But Jesus used that notion of being born again or being born from above as a metaphor for metanoia, for conversion. Nicodemus was a person of social distinction. He was born into a respectable family. He was a member of the Sanhedrin. So he had social status and recognition. And Jesus challenged him to be born again, meaning to adopt a different stance, to um, um, not be guided um, by the notion that one merits something on the basis of one's um, you know social distinction or wealth or status. And Paul, I think, talks about this in the second reading today. That the notion that grace is free, that we are all equal in the sight of God, that we are all sinners, and through God's grace that um, we can live a dignified life, a work of art, he says in the end, doesn't he? And so Nicodemus is challenged to adopt a very different way of living, the way of living that is premised on this central tenet that it is by giving away, it is by loving, giving life away, that we live life to the full. And that paradox is really central to the gospel, central to the life of Christ. So Jesus used that image of the serpent on the standard in the Old Testament. When the Jews had complained and rebelled against God, and the fiery serpents appeared and harmed them and killed them. And by looking at this bronze serpent on the standard, that they were healed. But Nicodemus knew that it is not the healing power that came from the serpent on the cross, but that is a means of God's grace, God's forgiveness, God's healing. So it's not the serpent that healed, but God who healed. And so Jesus is the new healing power of God. And this Nicodemus did not quite understand at this stage that Jesus was referring to Calvary, was referring to the cross. The cross, a means of destruction, of killing, of a symbol of shame and condemnation, and yet God used it to transform, to give life. So Jesus was talking to Nicodemus about the power of God in the cross. And then we go back further to the Old Testament, the book of Chronicles, that recounts the events before the exile, and then how God, in His love and mercy, restored His people from exile. And the lesson they ought to learn from from the ebbs and flows of history, and that when they live by the covenant, then um, they are assured of a bright destiny. But when they depart from the covenant, then these evil things occur. So they are to renew their commitment to the covenant. And the covenant essentially is the covenant of love, of faithfulness to God, of caring for one another, especially the vulnerable members of the community. So, friends, as we move towards the climax of our Lenten season, Holy Week and Easter, let us also renew our commitment to live by the paradox of the gospel, the cross, and its living, transforming power ought to be the very center of our lives, as it was in the life of Jesus. May we live that spirit of self-giving love, may, as opposed to self-interest, self-survival, and follow the way of Christ, and becoming the work of art that we are meant to be.